Every morning, news cycles across the United States repeat a chilling tally. Before the first quarter of the year is even over, thousands of Americans have already died from gun violence, averaging out to roughly 117 deaths every single day. This constant stream of headlines creates a specific image for those watching from abroad. To an outsider, the U.S. appears to be a singular, 2,680-mile-wide crime scene where safety is non-existent, regardless of where you stand. Looking at the broad data, however, tells a different story. This chart shows that the national murder rate in the U.S. is statistically on par with countries like Turkey, Thailand, and Tunisia, nations that are rarely characterized as zones of extreme, uncontrollable violence. This statistical disconnect exists because violence is not a thin layer spread across the entire population. Instead, it is tied to how the country is geographically divided. Mapped at the county level, the distribution is stark. 54% of all American counties record 0 murders, yet a mere 2% of counties account for 56% of homicides. The violence isn't everywhere, it's clustered into small pockets. This suggests the U.S. doesn't face a broad national epidemic of violence, but rather a series of hyper-concentrated crises. Solving the problem requires looking past the national borders and into the specific zip codes where the map turns red. To see this concentration in action, we have to focus on the small number of counties that carry the national statistics. Places like St. Louis, Baltimore, and Chicago's Cook County are frequently cited as the most dangerous areas in the country. But even within these cities, the danger isn't uniform. A person can walk through most of these counties and be perfectly safe, because the violence is almost entirely restricted to a handful of specific neighborhood blocks. Take Los Angeles County, home to over 10 million people. This map shows that just 10% of its zip codes are responsible for 41% of all murders. Most of that is concentrated in specific areas like the 77th Street and Southeast divisions. This creates a radical contrast. 2/3 of the county is statistically identical to the safest nations in the world, while a few specific streets experience a rate of violence that mirrors a war zone. In many American cities, the difference between total safety and extreme danger is a matter of a few miles. Crossing that neighborhood border can be the statistical equivalent of moving from a highly developed nation into a combat zone. The physical distance between these areas is small, but the gap in life expectancy is vast. In some American cities, your zip code can determine whether you live a full life or die 20 years early. In Baltimore, residents of the wealthy Homeland neighborhood have a life expectancy of 84. Just a few miles away in the Clifton-Berea neighborhood, that number drops to 66. These neighborhoods are often characterized by physical decay and a lack of basic services. Statistically, where lifespans are the shortest and health outcomes are the worst, the murder rates are consistently at their highest. Living in an environment of constant physical and social decline creates immense psychological pressure. When communities are defined by trauma, the resulting stress can cause individuals to overreact to conflict, turning minor disputes into violent encounters. These isolated zones become environments where the future feels statistically distant. When the prospect of a long, healthy life is removed, the social cost of violence feels lower, allowing despair to become the foundation for crime. This despair is usually the result of several converging forces, beginning with industrial collapse. In the 1960s, the loss of manufacturing and textile jobs in major cities left behind a vacuum that has never been filled by new opportunities. You can see the impact in Kensington, Philadelphia. This former textile hub now faces a crime rate 123% higher than the national average, as job loss paved the way for mass addiction and localized violence. This chart tracks the second force, the federal war on drugs. While the budget for drug control has increased by over 1,000% since the 1980s, drug use has simultaneously hit a 40-year high, creating a multi-billion-dollar black market in impoverished areas. This mirrors the era of alcohol prohibition shown here. When a high-demand product is made illegal, it doesn't disappear. It moves into an underground economy where disputes are settled with violence rather than in courts. In neighborhoods where legitimate economic ladders are broken, over 20,000 active gangs have stepped in to control this drug trade. For many, joining a gang isn't a preference, but a response to social and economic isolation. These conflicts are further escalated by the sheer volume of unregistered firearms in the U.S., estimated at nearly 400 million. In high-poverty areas, easy access to weapons ensures that black market competition has a lethal outcome. When industrial abandonment removes steady work and the drug war creates a violent black market, the widespread availability of firearms ensures that any friction within that system results in the high murder rates we see in these specific zones. Knowing that the violence is this concentrated raises a difficult question. Why haven't decades of police funding fixed these specific neighborhood blocks? The data suggests that simply inflating police budgets doesn't reliably change the outcome. In Los Angeles, for example, a decade of budget fluctuations has had no significant impact on the actual rate of violent crime in its most dangerous zip codes. Deploying highly militarized units into these neighborhoods treats the symptoms of the drug trade while ignoring the conditions that created it. It is an attempt to solve a social and economic crisis using tactical gear and armored vehicles. Alternatives do exist. Nations like Portugal have seen success by shifting from a criminal approach to a public health model, effectively defanging the violent black market by treating addiction as a medical issue rather than a legal one. If the violence tied to the drug trade and systemic poverty were removed, researchers suggest the U.S. murder rate would drop to around 1,700 deaths per year. Statistically, that would make the United States one of the safest countries on Earth. The American murder rate is a local crisis, not a national one. To solve it, we have to stop treating these specific neighborhood blocks as battlefields to be patrolled, and instead we must start treating them as living communities that need to be rebuilt from the ground up.